Welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I am Kathryn Peterson here with my co-host, Michael Regan, and today we have another amazing guest. And this one I'm excited about because I know him better than I know a lot of the guests, and that makes it pretty fun. And I know Michael's in the same spot. So Patrick Palmer is joining us today. He's been in the industry, in the mortgage side of the industry for almost 30 years, if you can believe that, and has really worked in a lot of different facets of the industry. So he is a great leader for us to chat with today. I'm excited to make sure you guys get to know him as well as Michael and I know him. And first, though, I'm going to welcome my very fun and non-sarcastic co-host, Michael Regan.
Wow, that's a lot of expectations. You know, we got some friends that we eat dinner with, and every once in a while, Dawn will say, "Come on, Michael, be funny." That's a tough setup. Patrick, it is so great to have you with us. And look, on a personal level, I just love any time we get to spend together. Patrick and I spend part of our year in the same location in the beautiful state of Oregon, and I try my best to get that guy out on a walk anytime I can, because every time I do, I leave feeling energized. I just love being with you. So to get to be with you on Zoom today is like a half step there. I'm looking forward to the next one. How have you been doing, my brother?
I've been doing great. You know, you don't live here when it's really hard to live here, which is the 6 months that it rains. You disappear and then come back when it's magical here. So winters can be tough here. Not a lot of properties being listed, as you can imagine, and there's a lot of rain and a lot of gray. So you have to escape once in a while, but we just keep fighting our way through it every year.
All right. Well, as you and Angela are looking for an escape, you just remember at Camp Regan, there is always a guest room available for you. Patrick, here's what I want to dig into. I think if our audience is aware of you, they're aware of the fact that, you know, in recent years, you've had some really interesting leadership roles. But I want to go way back to a guy that it sounds like maybe 30 years ago was entering an industry in which he was looking for orientation from existing leaders. And I want to know, what was drawing your attention as a young man in this business? When you were getting started, who were some of those influences that you at an early age said, okay, maybe good or bad, I'm paying attention to what that person is telling me or showing me? Do you remember some of those influences?
Yeah, I mean, I was in the sales and marketing side of the space as an originator for many, many years, as you know. And the first time that I really took notice of a leader was Jerry Baker at First Horizon. Before it was First Horizon, it was like a conglomerate of like seven different names, and he pulled them all together under one brand. And I remember probably the first time really recognizing, oh, this is what leadership is and what it looks like and what it does. And I happened to be in Phoenix, Arizona, of all places at the time, and he was hosting what he called then a fireside chat. And we went and we just sat down in a big room, and there was actually no fireplace, but he called it a fireside chat. And he talked a lot about what he saw for the company and the level of talent of the company and what he saw for the people of the company. And it was probably my first introduction to vision and values and how to make decisions for a large company. Up to that point, it was just really more sales and marketing training, and not really like, here's how you operate from a much higher level and get everybody within an organization, you know, rowing in the same direction. So that was probably the first. The one that I had more probably up close contact with and learned a lot from was the person that ran our division. Her name was Nancy Mercer, and she was incredible. And I got the chance to go hiking with Nancy up Camelback Mountain, and boy, just a really, really competitive, bright, sharp, but also really, really cared about her people. So she'd teach you how to make really good decisions and not just give you everything you wanted because you were a good salesperson, but also really, really wanted what's best for you and showed you how to achieve that. So those were my, and gosh, Michael, this was probably 2001, maybe some 24 years ago.
Well, you just said something that makes total sense to me, because one of the things I've been able to see in the time that I've walked alongside you is you seem to have what you just described in her, this really interesting mix of competitive drive, but then a deep level of care. Was that already on board? Like, if we could go back to, you know, Oregon high school era, were you already that person, or did a person like Nancy help influence who you became as a leader in the years to come?
Yeah, that stuff was all developed. I mean, I would love to say at a young age that this stuff just came naturally and I had some level of gifting, but that's just not really the case. I did have amazing parents. I had an amazing dad who was really blue collar, hardworking, and some of the things that you learn that translate are like do anything that you need to do to take care of your family. You don't ever quit, no matter what's going on. Tomorrow's going to be bring a brighter day and always dream. And I had a mom who was always there and always available, and was more of the emotional support. So you take those things, but the leadership stuff, I can tell you, was very intentional. Being coached for a long number of years and learning by not just from coaches, but from my peers. That's where that stuff comes from. Is it's learned and honed. You don't. I'm not sure that anybody's just truly born with it all.
So in going back a little bit, so let's say somebody worked with you 25 years ago. Would they recognize you today as the leader you are today?
Probably bits and pieces, and probably what they would see more today is that I'm probably far more patient. The young leader was quick to make a bad decision and didn't really know how to slow down and look at things from a multitude of angles. The young version of me was not very good at taking criticism, not very well equipped to handle anything that came at you that was an opposing view or opinion. And I'm not saying I mean I still struggle with those things today, but I think over time you learn to just slow down, take in lots of different elements, and then breathe things out a little bit more. But I think that younger version, they would see parts of it and glimpses of it, but they would say, wow, he's a far more patient, understanding, and probably takes a little more time before he quickly makes a decision.
Okay, so now Kathryn's question makes me want to dig in a little bit to the, you've got this opportunity to follow some leaders that are influential. So you're seeing, whether it's through coaching or just being able to work with some really inspirational people, you've got these great models in which to follow, and yet you just described yourself as someone who, may have been quick to make a bad decision and that kind of mindset. For our listeners, Patrick, I mean, we don't know, there's a broad range of folks that'll listen to this. Would you have been more in the camp that I have to learn that stove is hot? Thanks for telling me not to touch the burner, but I've got to touch it. Or were you quick to pick up those cues? How did that go as you were evolving?
Definitely somebody when I was younger that would have to touch the stove to realize how hot it was. Somebody could tell you it's hot, but you don't know that it's going to burn and hurt till you touch it. We go through that with our kids. It's like to this day, I'm still telling my kids that's hot, don't touch it. Sometimes they got to go touch it just to find out if how truthful I'm being. And so it's an interesting thing because when you're young, you're trying to make your mark on things and you're being aggressive and you want to achieve so much. And so you're going really, really fast. And there's actually some parts of that young leader I wish I had back, which is this. In fact, I was just talking to my team about this in the last week, is this being fierce and being okay with being uncomfortable and being on the accelerator and going really fast. I think as we've lived through a few things, we have a tendency to slow down and almost slow down too much to where we've become a little bit frozen to make a mistake or make a bad decision, or do something that's uncomfortable and end up with egg on our face or view it as a failure. And so there's some parts of that young leader that I would actually like to have back, because some of the mistakes weren't necessarily because I didn't think what somebody was telling me wasn't true. I was just so excited to get to the next level, to get to the next point, to achieve a specific outcome, that you end up getting burnt that way too.
All right, so then I'll ask a follow-up on that. Do you think that as you've experienced that slowing down, clearly that's not intentional. I mean, I know you to be a driven guy, and yet you're saying I missed some of that agility I had as a young person to just go for it and do it. As you look at how that's evolved over the years, what do you think is the why behind that? Why do we intuitively, if not accidentally, start playing things safer, even if we know that's not the winning formula? What's happening in a leader's mind as you've gone through that journey yourself?
I think it's a multitude of things. One of the things is the amount of scar tissue that you have, right? As you go through a longer career, you have some things and some setbacks that really hurt. They hurt people around you, they hurt your counterparts, they hurt family, they hurt your financial pocketbook. And so you start to see those. And when a situation comes up where you're like, beware, this could be dangerous, I think we slow down. I liken it to my kids, is they always want me to go snowboarding. And I'm like, well, I did a lot of snowboarding. And you know what? The last time I was on a snowboard, I tore my ACL. And they're like, yeah, but you're not going to do that again. And they're probably right. I should probably go snowboarding again. But once you've kind of had a little bit of scar tissue, you kind of say, okay, let's slow down. Let's look at this a little bit differently. And I think there is something lost in how tenacious you are as you've built up a little scar tissue, because you don't want those things to happen again. And moreover, I like a lot of that is I don't want it to happen to my people. Like the pain and discomfort of it just happening to me probably is not that big of a deal, but I don't necessarily want some of the people that I'm leading to have to go through those things. And the reality is you just can't protect them. You almost have to kind of just keep shoving them along and shove them off the cliff to take the risks that they need. And if they get a boo-boo, they get a boo-boo.
So, Patrick, despite those scars, how do you keep leading with passion after leading for so long? Because I know it can get tiring and it can get wearing, and it's like, oh my gosh, today I'm not in the right mood to be a leader. How do you keep showing up day after day with passion that comes through in everything you do?
So I've always been a believer both in coaching and mentoring. And I have some amazing mentors in my life, and they're great people to go to and say, hey, I'm feeling kind of rudderless, or I'm feeling kind of exhausted, or I'm feeling like maybe I don't have that extra gear today. And when you surround yourself with amazing people who have been there before, they typically have insights as to, yeah, I went through that season several times, and this is a way, or these are the things that you could do. Like ultimately, um, the mortgage industry is one of those things that once it gets into your system, it never really goes away. So even though there's been times or seasons in my life where I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. Like I'm exhausted. 29, I've seen everything you would think there is to see. And now I'm seeing things that I didn't even know existed. Right. And it just keeps bringing me back. And so there's even been times where I've tried to pull away and do other things, whether it was part-time or others, and they were around hobbies like cycling. Like I started a wheel manufacturing company, and I've done all sorts of like really fun, cool projects. And the reality is, no matter what I do, I love the people in this industry, and I love how we affect people's lives so much that something always rekindles and always resparks. But if I'm in a short-term crunch and I'm really feeling like, what am I missing? Like how come the spark is gone today? Doesn't mean it's going to be gone forever. And typically a call to just somebody who's been through ups and downs or is in a like industry where not every moment's going to be great. And there's a lot of moments that are amazing. That's probably the best thing that I can do is reach out, be surrounded by those people. Going to events, go to a coaching event or go to a breakout session. I went to Tom Ferry this last week, and some of my energy came from being in a room with 600 real estate agents who were fired up. And all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, I'm fired up. This is a great industry. Maybe I kind of forgot for a month or two, but I'm fired up. Let's go.
Okay, so that's a great segue for the question I wanted to ask, which is, what are some of the things that, so maybe look back at those recent events, look back at those recent mentor conversations. What are some of the things that excite you right now? Because I don't think enough people do talk about the things that they're excited about. We're always quick to point out all the things that are happening that we should be aware of or concerned about. But when I'm around you, I always leave feeling more energy. And it's because I think you always see what's coming up ahead as something that's drawing you and exciting you. So share with us a little bit about what you're excited about as a leader here in 2025.
I think the last couple of years has brought almost everybody back to what is the fundamental thing that keeps you going. And I realized that every time I get just even briefly away from vision and what we're trying to accomplish over the long term with our people and their referral partners and their clients and their teammates, it's really easy to get sideways in a business like this. Like you have to stay super hyper focused on what's happening tomorrow and what are we doing today to plan for tomorrow. The most recent conversation I had that got me really like pretty fired up about vision was it wasn't me talking to a mentor. It was somebody that's actually come to me, and he's recently become the president of a commercial construction company, and they hadn't really done much vision planning yet, and he was having some employee type problems. And instantly I went just back to my coaching background. I'm like, you got to have something that ties everybody together in a shared process where they understand where you're going as one. And just me having this past shared experience with this person fired me back up at work to say, we've got to get back into elements of our vision. Why are we doing this? And how do we go about doing it? Well.
Kathryn, listening to Patrick say that is such an encouraging reminder to me, because you and I have these conversations. And if any of my audience out there that I get to work with is paying attention, we have those conversations as well. It's critical that we know what it is we do. We know how to do it. We need to have skill. We need to have expertise. But if we skip over the why, I can guarantee you, when the days are cold and hard, when the market conditions aren't favorable, you will not know how to drum up that emotion for very long. I mean, you might do it for a little while, but at some point, even good guys have bad days. And if you're not clear on that why, and that why isn't strong enough to push you forward on a day where you don't even want to get up and do it at all, then that's a hard battle to stay in. And so, Kathryn, I think about listening to this, and it excites me because he's right. We sometimes complicate this, don't we? We make it about all these external things when really it's a very internal thing when we look at the why. I'm so glad to hear you say that, Patrick. And Kathryn, I'm sure you've got a much better question than I have, just recapping that point.
Well, my question kind of comes back to that vision and simplicity of, so let's say you could go back to the 20-year-old Patrick that we were just talking about. What's just a really simple piece of advice that you would give that fellow today?
I think the first thing I would tell him is it's a marathon. Like, slow down and understand that success and longevity in a business like this are going to just be like one step at a time over the long haul. Just put one piece down at a time and just keep going and just keep going. And I think I probably would have saved myself some periods of burnout. I think I probably would have been able to run at a faster pace longer. I spent a lot of time early sprinting, and there's nothing wrong with sprinting. It's hard to sprint for 30 years. Really, really hard to sprint for 30 years. And so you can affect a lot more people. You can stay in a better space if you understand that, hey, I'm going to do this. And to do things that I want to do, it might take me 15, 20, 30 years. So really, really, I don't know that I could have taught myself that. I try to tell my children that, and the people that are around me that are in that age group, and they see everything as a sprint, and I see the fire in their eyes. It's kind of cool. But just remember that, it's a marathon, Patrick. Breathe, pace yourself, and just be steady and consistent.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, and hearing you tie it into a frame that I hope our audience can relate to, which is, we often get so focused on the business opportunities or applications, but using an example of where we see it in our kids and see how they are now going through a struggle that we probably recognize, but we can't live it for them. We can point in the right direction. We can model good things, but at some point, like we did 25, 30 years ago, they too have to walk down that road. And we hope that when they do come back to us, we've given them, my wife likes to say it this way: keep your mouth shut and keep the doormat out.
What's interesting for our children that I think I was really, really lucky to have is I didn't have social media. I didn't see everybody in the world having instant success and feeling like if I didn't do it by the time I was 22, I might as well not try anymore. I mean, I think that the young people are being a little bit left behind with that mentality. And I'm so grateful that I didn't. It was just literally people in a room with a bunch of phones, and everybody that you knew told you, settle in, because it's going to be 5 years before you make any real money, have any real success. This is just like the attrition rate's really high. Just do this for a long period of time. And so like when we talk about our kids, right, it's even more difficult to impress upon them that, hey, you're going to see all this stuff. You have to block it out and understand that life is lived out over several decades.
Super good.
Yeah, I think our kids give us a good perspective of what we were like at that point and how to guide and steer. So with that, now that you're kind of in that, I don't want to say this necessarily the way you might hear it, but you're not at the beginning stages of leadership. You're in, let's say, the last third of your leadership, right? How are you doing things a little bit differently, and what do you see that legacy being for you moving forward?
Michael will really understand this because we went through this process together. And I know when I went through the process because it was, I made a job shift, so 6 years ago. Um, Up until that point, I had run or operated companies from the C-suite, and that means you do everything. You work on LO compensation, you work with legal, you work with compliance, you do a lot of things that, um, not that they're not interesting, but for some people they're not very fun. And for me, they weren't in my strengths. And it was just came with the territory, but I found that it was making me sick. Like I'm doing all this stuff that I don't love. I'm not necessarily passionate. I'm really not good at it. So I'm having to try to leverage a lot of other people to be good at it on my behalf. Yet it's part of the job on some degree. You have to understand it and know it, or you can get in a lot of trouble and lose a lot of people, a lot of money. And I went through the process of saying, for the benefit of my own health, for the benefit of being more productive, for the benefit of my children, I have to sit down and analyze the things that I love to do every single day. And that's all I want to do. And if that means that role or that title looks different, and I don't go to the home office and I don't participate in certain things, and maybe I don't, maybe I make a third of what I made before. All I said was I need to do the things that I love to do every single day. Well, that happens to be working with leaders at the branch level, at the street level, and doing a couple of different things for them or with them. And the people that have either worked with me in the past or work with me now know that in my check-in calls, there's two or three things that happen almost like clockwork. Number one, I'm going to ask you how your team's doing. The people that you've hired, the people that you work with, I want to know how you're doing with your team, how they're gelling, how they're organized. And I'm going to talk to you about what your P&L looks like and how to be more profitable. And I'm probably going to talk to you, if you want it, on how you're doing in sales and marketing. And so the things that I was really good at, which was the accounting side of the operating metrics of running a business, like a profit and loss statement, like a balance sheet, like cash positions, as well as building teams and hiring the right people. Like those were the things that I wanted to do every single day. And if it cost me a bunch of other things to get there, it didn't really matter to me. That's how it had to be, or I wasn't going to be in the industry very much longer anyways. And I hope that over time, like legacy is this like thing that we're all trying to figure out what we leave behind. And then you start to get to the point where you realize that's really completely up to other people. Like really all I want people to know is that I really did care about them. I really did show up for them, and I really wanted to see them do extremely well and maximize their potential. And if that's all they remember me for, then I will have, I guess, done what I set out to do.
Patrick, let's take that topic of legacy and let's bring it home with that, because that's a really great place to land this conversation. When I think about a season in which you and I were having some really deep conversations about, who do I want to be? And you started making some of those decisions around how I'm going to operate from this point forward. I think what really became evident to me, and I think anyone else who spent time with you, was that unlike folks who are trying to orchestrate their legacy, create a narrative, create a facade, you went the other direction and said, I'm going to double down on staying true to who I know I am and how I know I operate and how I know I add value. And I'm just going to trust that that's going to be good enough for those that recognize the authenticity in that, because there's no bull crap. I'm not going to play a part just so you can feel good that I, said this, did this. I hope people are hearing that, because that applies to our audience. We call our podcast Building Bigger Lives. And we hope people are listening to a leader like you saying, you had a choice. There was a fork in the road. You could have said, I'm going to do what other people think is important, and instead you stayed true to who you were. Where does that grounding come from in a leader like you? How do you know to stay true to yourself even when everybody's trying to pull you apart?
I think at that time, one of my daughters was playing soccer, and part of that job was traveling 40 weeks a year. And she came to me and she's like, Dad, are you going to come to my soccer games this year? And so sometimes your success as a leader ends up being a failure as a dad, or you feel that way in the moment. You're like, wait a minute, I have to change some things. I need to do this differently because we're only going to have X amount of time when they're little, right? And so creating a scenario where I'm not on the road 40 weeks a year and the title's great and the money's great and the success is great and all those things are great. But at the end of the day, as I wrote down my priorities in life, they weren't the most important things to me. And there was a lot of me that hated giving a lot of those things up. Frankly, there was a lot that I loved in terms of operating companies at the highest level, but this just happened to be far more important. And there's really nothing like being grounded than when your daughter says, hey, Dad, I want you to come to my soccer game. That's the most like for me, that's the most powerful grounding there is. There's nothing higher than that. So it was there like that. That was ultimately, I kept hearing that voice of Peyton's like, hey, what's up, Dad? Not in a mean way or not. Yeah, it wasn't anything like overly dramatic or anything like that. It was just like, hey, Dad, what's up? I'm like, she's right. I got to think about this differently.
Kathryn, when I hear that story, I think we can talk all we want about life planning and vision, which to me are tools that we use to help to get someone to think in a way that Patrick just spent 20, 30 minutes unpacking for us. What a great thing we have to have documented just this short interview with him to be able to do that. Any closing thoughts you have before we let Patrick get back to his day?
So Patrick, I think how I would describe you as a calm leader. And I feel like that came over time. And so it's been good to see that a little bit on this of where that calmness comes from. And obviously there've been ups and downs over your career, but I'm excited to see what's to come and am honored to have you as a friend.
Great stuff. I love what you guys are doing.
Well, we appreciate you being with us. Patrick, if you had a closing thought, would you want to make sure our audience heard anything today? Like what's the big takeaway from Patrick Palmer in 2025?
Be honest with your people. And if you're struggling, tell them you're struggling. If you're missing the mark, tell them you're missing the mark. If you're on fire and you're crushing it, tell them you're on fire and you're crushing it. But they know. Like one of the things that I've learned from other leaders is that you're not fooling your people. They know. Just be honest with them and let them know. Hey, either, I'm missing the mark here and I'm sorry about that and let's get back after it again. Or, hey, I'm crushing it and I want to see you crush it too. Just be honest with them. It'll pay dividends.
Spoken like a man who knows how to crush your barriers. Well said, my friend. Listen, we're going to put a wrap on this episode of Building Bigger Lives. My thanks again to my fabulous co-host, Kathryn, to our guest today, Patrick Palmer. We hope if you're tuned in, whether it's on Audible, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on Apple, or you follow the video version on YouTube, that if you found some great takeaways from what Patrick shared, that you'll be happy to share those with folks in your world. You'll be happy to comment. We'd love to have a conversation with you about leadership. Leadership is not a destination. It is a journey. And I know that sounds perhaps a little trite, but I want you to hear loud and clear. If you go back and listen to today's podcast with Patrick, you get a glimpse of what that journey might look like. And there are some things we can learn along the way. I hope you enjoyed learning just like I did. And we'll see you soon on another episode of Building Bigger Lives.